Hey everybody, your friendly neighborhood Truthiness here on behalf of Steel Command. So as promised, new type of content, videos. I know, crazy. So today I'm going to be breaking down Thrawn Two Ship. If you've been paying attention to the Armada Meta, this archetype has been tearing up the regional scene. It's also very dominant at Worlds. Didn't quite break it into the top, but it's still a very heavy presence in the meta. So today I'm going to first break down what makes a Thrawn 2 ship, how it ticks, and then most importantly, for those of you out there that don't want to fly it, I'm going to try and break down some counter tactics for it. So here we go.
Obviously, the first key component of Thrawn Two Ship is Thrawn. So he does a couple things for the list. First of all, he's providing flexibility above all else. No matter what the counter is across the board, Thrawn is giving an immense amount of flexibility to to the two-ship player. Typically, what they're going to use is navigate alongside a squadron command. So that lets the Quasar and the ISD do what every squad heavy fleet wishes they could do, and that's be able to adjust nav, or rather adjust speed, and then add extra yaw into that equation as well. So Thrawn absolutely enables a ton of flexibility in this two-ship build. Now the secondary benefit of Thrawn is being essentially slicer proof. It's not 100% because you're still going to lose that flexibility of being able to nav and or another command and do squadrons. But because this fleet is 300 and some plus points of squadrons, you absolutely need to protect that squadron command. So with Thrawn able to back up his buddies, he essentially makes it so that you can ensure a squadron command for the fleet in those critical opening turns. The next huge key component is Governor Price. So there's a lot of debate going on online right now about just how powerful she is. And there is absolutely no doubt. She is an incredible tool that completely upends the activation game. But she does have to get telegraphed. And I'll show you how you can take advantage of that a little bit. Not so much to force a bad turn for the Imperial player, but more to just mitigate her influence on the game. But this is the entire reason Thrawn 2 Ship is two ships. She can be in a couple different places. Obviously, there's two places she could be. One version of the build puts Price on a Quasar. The other version puts it on the tank ship. And something I forgot to mention in the Thrawn segment is the second ship in the build is going to be some kind of tank. Now, I've seen an interdictor style, which is just super tough. Believe it or not, tougher than any other large ship I've ever tried to kill in the game. And the other version is an ISD. So where you put Price is going to heavily influence how the fleet flies, but she can be in either place, and there are strengths and advantages to each. Next up is Squall. Obviously, that's going to be on the Quasar itself. This enables an absolutely huge radius of movement for the attached squadrons, and it may not look like much, but once you actually see it on the table, it gives this build absolutely phenomenal range to move squadrons around. This is especially nice when you're going against a squadronless build, because there's absolutely nothing to stop you from moving your squadrons with Squall as long as the ship stays alive. So this is a huge part of the threat radius to the build and a ton of flexibility. You're also going to almost certainly see Captain Brunson. She has become ubiquitous in Imperial fleets for good reason. She is incredibly cost effective, cheaper than Major Durlin, but capable of so much more mitigation. At one of my very first game at Worlds, actually, she mitigated 10 damn damage throughout the game. For 5 points, that's incredible. So whichever ship Price is not on, Brunson will be on the other one. And I'll explain a little bit of difference when I get to the fleets from Worlds about the advantages and disadvantages of having her and Price on different ships. Up next is Merrick Steele. This guy is the all-around squadron for Imperials. The guy is an absolute beast both in the anti-squadron fight and against ships. You can almost always guarantee him getting 2 damage on everything he does. He's fast, he's tough, and for love of God, you're always going to forget that he has grit. So tying him down is actually a little harder than you think. He is an absolutely critical part of this build, and I actually probably say he's probably the most important squadron in the entire build. If he dies, a good chunk of the flexibility and the anti-ship damage especially goes away with him. And of course, Merrick wouldn't be anywhere without his good buddy, Colonel Jendon. So Colonel Jendon may not look like much initially. At least a lot of people didn't think much of him when he came out. But you can't deny that he is an incredible tool to have. So even post-relay nerf, he's got that relay 2. It extends the command range of the Quasar and the ISD to make sure that Merrick and every other squadron usually is within range of some kind of command. And he also just straight up makes your best squad able to fire again. So if Merrick's in range of something and you need him to tap again, Merrick it is. If you've got Morna who's coming up next, she can tap again too. So Jendon is a great force multiplier and effectively becomes the second best generalist the Imperials have because he just makes your best generalist do it again. The second M in MMJ that you see abbreviated online is Morna. So she, like Merrick, is also a very good generalist. She's decent in the anti-squadron game, very reliable, both in the anti-squadron game and the anti-ship game, thanks to her ability. And the fact that her single brace can get locked down makes her actually more vulnerable than her 8-hull might initially make you think. But really, it's only there to re-roll her dice anyway, so if you can kill her, all the better. Alright, so those key components can all come together in a couple of different ways. So what you have in front of you here is the 6 overall list at Worlds. This was the highest placing 2-ship build in the tournament. I like to leave names out of these things so you can find in other places where that might be, but I'm not going to put it in the video. So this is your pretty bog standard ISD plus Quasar build. Governor Price is on the ISD, and the advantage here is that you add a absolutely giant impactful activation in the ship battery from the ISD, and then you add the squadron component to it. So it is a absolutely giant 1-2 punch, and I really cannot understate how great that is. And however, it does make the ISD a little more vulnerable compared to the second build you're going to see here soon. Brunson goes on the Quasar in this version of the build. Now, if you've ever flown a Quasar before, you know they are very, very hard to keep alive. So Brunson adds that wonderful, wonderful mitigation to the Quasar, keeps it going a little longer, makes it deceptively hard to kill. Now, the squadrons, they're going to look pretty similar from build to build. Morna, Merrick, Jendon. Now, in this particular build, Dengar, Mauler, Saber, Black Squadron, and a generic TIE Fighter here. So again, the main 3 you got to worry about are MMJ. They're going to be the bulk of the anti-ship damage in the build. Dengar's there to keep everybody moving, and everybody else there is there to help win the squad-on-squad fight. Now, in addition to the squads themselves, Price is a giant part of the squad-on-squad fight for this build. Now, this one isn't quite as good at the squad-on-squad fight as the next one you're going to see, because Squall is going to have to go and use its movement bonus before the primary Price last first delivery system in the ISD. However, it still helps with that Alpha Strike from a significant distance. And that's what it's looking to try and do. Alpha Strike, and then follow it up with first player the next turn, and just pound things really fast, make a giant impact on the game before your opponent can react. Now, the 7th overall at Worlds is an example of flipping Price to the Quasar and going for a tankier ship on the flagship. Yes, this is not technically only 2 ships. We've referred to this build kind of as 2.5 ship because the Gazanti is there, it's providing help, but the principles of using Price with impactful activations is what sets this in the family of quote-unquote 2 ship. Now, I had the pleasure of flying against this exact fleet myself. That interdictor is tough as nails. I saw another version in the first round at Worlds, had an ISD instead of the interdictor, but same general idea. Brunson's on the flagship, makes it really, really tanky. So you add targeting scramblers, an interdictor title to that, and you have one hell of a nasty ship. The squad-on-squad fight is where this build, I think, excels compared to the previous build we just saw. It's able to influence the squad game in a single self-contained activation in the Quasar. So it activates, it does squall, it then commands everything it just squalled, giving basically an effective speed 7 movement to squadrons all in one single activation. And really, there's no possible way you can outreach that, especially if you're playing Rebels. The only way Imperials are doing it is if they're also squalling and commanding with speed 5 squadrons themselves.
So what I have set up here on the table is a fairly typical 2-ship deployment. Now, it's only 2 ships, so the deployment's actually going to be pretty well telegraphed. First ship down in the Quasar ISD version is going to be the Quasar because it's the most disposable. And then in the interdictor version I showed you, the Gazanti is still likely to be the first one down. However, that's more or less irrelevant for your purposes, as I'll show you in a little bit. So what makes this build so nasty is the ability to reach out and touch things on the very, very first turn. So first you have your squall move. So I'll use Merrick exclusively just to demonstrate the potential range here. So Merrick does his speed 2 squall move. Then he's got his natural speed 5, takes him all the way out there. He's already reaching into your deployment zone, as you can see there, speed at distance 3 there. So he's into the deployment zone. So if you brought Reimer to play, you can see right there, he is hitting well into the deployment zone. Almost no ship can, even hugging the wall there, almost no ship can avoid that. Even if he doesn't have Reimer along, he's still looking at a huge distance of play. Now, how do you avoid that? So let me come over here and demonstrate. So first, let me thank Boba Fett. He's the one who kind of keyed me into some of these counter tactics that the guys in California started using. So what you want to do, first and foremost, is forget your usual forward-facing deployment. If you face straight at this build and go right on the line, you're just asking for it. So here's a couple CR90s. If you just go straight in, do your usual token banking, and try and just go right at this build, especially if it's the Quasar version, it's just going to last first, bring Morna over there easily with a Squall plus range 3, and just absolutely nuke probably 2 small ships in a turn, because it'll probably kill a CR90 with Merrick, Morna, and Jendin, along with a couple of the enablers, maybe getting a lucky die in there, and probably kill that little CR90 on the last activation of the very first turn. And then it'll probably come over here and hit your buddy with the first activation of the turn. This is where the build gets a lot of its strength. It's going to kill 2 significant targets in that very first double whammy. So like I said, you just can't go straight at this build. What you have to do is force some kind of choice onto the price activation turn. So you do that mainly by deploying sideways. So I've done this enough times to know pretty well the measurements here, so bear with me. So let's say I've got my 2 CR90s, and I want to do is generally distance 2 in, and you're going to go, make sure you're all going in the same direction. I made this mistake at Worlds. I put one ship going kind of off into the corner there, became kind of non-factor. So what you want to do is have your ships grouped together, all heading the same direction. You're going to line up the lead ship with whatever ship is down. So in this particular case, the direction is pretty easy to pick. Since the Quasar is heading that direction, I'm going to base that direction. If the ship is coming straight at you, pretty much just pick a direction and go for it. So lead ship, about distance 2 into the board. You're going to separate them by about distance 2 as well. And what you're trying to do here is force the price player to either A, price on turn 1, in which case you basically say thanks, but no thanks, and you turn as hard as you can, or not as hard as you can, but just one click at the first joint and a second click at the end joint. I tend to float around speed 3, especially with CR90s. This also works for hammerheads. The trick is, however, you have to be willing to use that command that first turn. There's no banking tokens against this build. You pretty much have no choice to navigate and navigate fast. So first turn, I activate, use that nav command. Price is coming at me on turn 1. So I'm saying, see ya. I'm not going to play your game. And look, you've just managed to edge out range on Merrick. And this is him coming in a straight line. If he has to come at an angle, that will reduce his range even further. It's kind of a ball. And what you're going for is probably not exactly like this. What you really want to do is be able to split that right down the middle where he just cannot get to either ship in your combo line. Now let's back it off here. Say it's price 2. So that is actually where you take advantage of it. Now, admittedly, some of this is my own bias, using CR90s a lot, but they're just kind of the perfect little ship for this example. What you do is take your nav command and you turn in as hard as you can and just beeline straight for that ship, or ships that are around those squadrons. And what you're doing here is banking on Price not being able to use that last first to knock out multiple ships before you're ready to fight. So if you're absolutely crazy like me, you may have strapped engine techs to your CR90s, and what that lets you do is start potentially lobbing long-range dice at that quasar once it moves forward. So you can see there, this one's got range on where that quasar is likely to be, even if it only goes speed 1. So this works especially well with Radis, which has been my preferred admiral for competitive play for a little bit, because even if I have to say, have to do the hug on turn 1, I still have some extremely disposable flotillas, and these are more than happy to start the game out right in the line and then just push up forward. So that way, Price pretty much has no choice to come on turn 1, because otherwise Radis is going to jump right on top of a ship at the beginning of turn 2, and that ship is going to have no choice but to just sit there and take it. So yes, this absolutely is optimized for Radis play in particular. Now I can hear the complaints. Truthy, I'm not a dirty Radis player like you, so your stupid tricks are never going to work. Well, that's partially true. A lot of my experience against Two Ship has been colored by myself using Radis. So yeah, understandable criticism. However, this sideways trick can still work to a degree. I've used Sato hammerheads to kind of work as well. They cut in pretty hard into that and have the ability to reach out at long range. So it can work. It's just a bit harder. So what I've got here is another example, is my preferred squadron heavy build for Rebels right now. So I've got 2 CR90s, Yavaris, a couple flotillas. I've got a nice Biggs ball with 3 generic X-Wings and Biggs. I've got Jan, and then I've got 10, a B-Wing, and then I've also got Nim along for the ride. So again, this sideways deployment can kind of work. You just cannot, once again, be on the line. You are going to get alpha struck if you do that. So again, this is all about, what do you do if it's price 1? Well, you got to avoid that last first. So what you do is you cut in as hard. You cut in again toward the board edge, kind of looking the same as before. You go in harder toward the edge. Same thing. You're here. This flotilla moves up here. Yavaris kind of hugs the wall as well, ending up right about here. And everybody's out of bomber range, and everybody is ideally out of Merrick range. I didn't quite do it there, but just got to be a little more careful than that. So then you move your squads so that they're hugging the wall just along with the rest of your ships. And then it becomes, now you've got Price out of the way to stop that last first. Then you commit inside to take the squadron fight on more even terms than before. Now, if it's price 2, seeing your delaying tactics, they're going to try and delay that squadron last first. So once again, you cut inside. You use your small ships to provide some ship-to-ship pressure on the main carrier, and then your squad Merrick will be back there, probably turtling a little bit, and you use your own squads to try and give them no other choice but time to engage you. So I'm going to move all my X-Wings up here, get Biggs up there on the line. I'm just going to do this real hand wavy real quick, show you how this generally works. Yavaris will cut in as well. He's only able to go speed 3, but also FCT the B-Wings and speed 2 during the squad phase. Okay. And yeah, they can probably pull their squads back a little bit, but you're in a better position to kind of make this really awkward because again, you've got that ship pressure coming from your CR90s. This has been forced to move forward a little bit, and keep in mind some of those squads are going to have to move before you move your squads in as well. So yeah, you're gonna not quite probably be able to get into range, but you'll be able to start throwing pressure on things, especially if you brought Adar Talon to play, because then you can do silly things like, oh, hey, here's Nim. Oh, hey, here's Nim again. And bada bing, bada boom, you've gone and done something silly just like the two ship build. So it's not easy by any means, and it's got a lot of advantages, but the sideways deployment to try and take price out of the equation is the main way to try and defeat two ship. So that's just one of the tricks I have to try and deal with two ship. It's worked for me. There's plenty of other ones out there I've been reading about. Boba Fett's the guy who kind of innovated the build alongside Sam Simmons. Both are out in California. I've heard their locals have had a lot of little tricks here and there to try and deal with it, including just using larger ships, having less of a soft underbelly with small ships. I've heard like Rebel Two Ship of all things, which normally wouldn't really thrive in a high activation meta, is apparently doing fairly well up there. Dennis, the world champ, I know he faced at least one Thrawn Two Ship on his way to the title. And I imagine he probably faced more than that given how many there were at Worlds. So he was running Sloane. Sloane's kind of a natural counter to Thrawn because the Thrawn Two Ship depends on aces pretty heavily, and Sloane slaughters aces pretty well. So if you have any other ideas, feel free to post them in the comments of this video, post them up on Steel Command's blog. I'm going to try and do these videos more often. They're actually fairly easy to do, especially compared to writing full-on articles, God forbid. So be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching.